Okay. Okay, Sasha, for the founders in the cohort who didn't use Olio this morning and maybe
Yeah.
not familiar with it, can you start off by sharing a little bit about the company and when it was started?
Yes, I'm just going to change the view because it's as mind-blowingly amazing it is to see so many women on one screen, which I haven't seen that in a while. I can't figure out where the speaker is. So, oh, there you are. Yeah, so hi everyone. Hopefully the last week went well for you. So I'm the co-founder of Olio. We are a mobile app that's free, and we connect anyone who has stuff they want to give away, whether it's food, toiletries, household items, clothing, whatever, with their neighbors. And so in a fast, fun, simple, easy way to give and get things for free. We also have a volunteer program with over 100,000 volunteers who rescue food that would have gotten thrown out at supermarkets. And then they share that food within the community from the safety of their own home. And that is how we've monetized, in that we charge all of the businesses a fee per collection to rescue and redistribute that food. We've got 6.8 million signed up users. We've seen food sharing take place in 62 countries successfully. And we've been around since 2015. So it's been quite the journey.
So what was it like in 2015 trying to start a mission-driven startup, especially because you're a venture-backed company? So what were those conversations like? Like, did you raise angel investment first and then VC, and how did those conversations go?
In 2015, Tessa, my co-founder, and I each decided that we would bootstrap. So just to be completely forthcoming, we each put in 20,000 pounds from our life savings. And for the first year, we bootstrapped. And we used that to build the first version of the app. But we were lucky enough to find our first investor was actually a web and mobile developer company who, in exchange for a small equity stake, gave us a very reduced fee for the build of the app.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, like, one of my things I'm most proud of is last year we were able to do, when we did our Series B, we were able to do a secondary, and they sort of were able to walk away with a quite life-changing amount of money for them, for taking that sort of leap of faith on us back in 2015 when everyone thought we were nuts for building an app for people to sort of share their moldy food with each other. It's what our husbands kept saying. But in terms of how we raised, we did not raise angel investment. We actually went straight to VCs, and we raised our seed. We didn't do a pre-seed. We raised our seed round from Excel about 9 or 10 months after we sort of came up with the idea for Olio. That's really unusual. We just got really lucky, and we were sort of in the right place at the right time. There was a female partner at Excel who could see right away that a $1.3 trillion problem, which is the scale of food waste, could be very lucrative for an entrepreneur or a set of entrepreneurs who could figure out how to unlock some of that wasted value.
Mm-hmm.
And Excel are still sort of one of our largest investors today. And we've had 5 rounds of financing over the last 7 years.
Wow.
But I am an angel investor myself, and I have made like over 30 angel investments. And I really believe in the power of angel investing, if you can sort of find the right people. Although I'm really not making any investments anymore because the market's gone to shit.
I guess it's a question for you as a founder and you as an angel, yes, because you were talking about the opportunity or the $1 trillion market. When people are approaching you about an investment opportunity, how big do you want to see the opportunity? Like, if you're looking at the total addressable market, is there a figure in your head then you're like, yes, okay, I can see this?
Yes, roughly speaking, like, I think you want to believe that a company could get to 100 million annual recurring revenue, i.e. 10x that would be a billion valuation, which would be a unicorn. This is real back of the envelope. I haven't actually articulated this before. And then therefore you have to assume if they take a percent of the market, if their sort of market share, let's say, is 10 or 15 or even 20%, like, how big does the size of the problem have to be? How big does the TAM have to be? So that's sort of how I would think about it.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so kind of reverse engineering it from the end goal back. Yeah.
Yes, which is you want, if you've got 100 investments, you want at least one of them to be sort of the breakout, then returns, delivers the return for your whole portfolio.
Yeah.
Did you have to already have the way that you were going to monetize and like capture that large market? Were you already doing some like MVP version of that when you were pitching Excel, or did they just buy into the fact that you two were so strong as founders, you'd be able to figure it out?
So because it's such a big problem and the type of our solution really depends on network effects, we're able to delay any serious conversation around monetization for a really long time. And so no, we just sort of said things like, if we unlocked 5% of that, that would be X amount. And we had a lot of hypotheses around how we could potentially monetize once we got to scale, because monetizing something that's subscale is counterproductive when your business relies on network effects. So because of that, we could really just deal in the world of hypothetical and also comparisons, like, well, look at how so-and-so is monetized and look at how so-and-so is monetized. These are proven business models. If we did that and we got to this stage, which of course we think we will do by when, then this is what it would be worth. But here's just a funny story. And we have not figured out how to do sort of breakthrough. We're a long ways away from profitable, and we need to continue to find new paths from new revenue streams, which is not entirely obvious, like where and how that's going to happen. And that's sort of what I do on a daily basis, is trying to figure that out. But we have been through so many different types of monetization models that I remember between, I think, Series A and our Series A follow-on or something like that, actually like dusted off the deck when we went to go raise. And there was like 20 million pounds of e-commerce revenue. And neither Tessa and I could remember at all in the slightest, like what this even was. Like, I don't know what we had to go back and like, we just couldn't even remember what it is that we put in as a placeholder in our model as a potential hypothetical revenue stream to unlock. So I guess what I'm trying to do is reassure early stage founders that you don't need to have the answer right now. You just need to know, like, keep just generating the hypotheses.
What do you think?
Ask a question here in connection to the same question here earlier. While a lot of the model that you have seems like community, it goes under the foundation sort of a structure. While you are looking at a for-profit monetized company in terms of community building. So how easy or then how difficult was it for you to convince, while you have answered a part of it, to convince the investors on it being a for-profit kind of a institution or for-profit kind of a company?
So you're right in that, depending, because we've also raised from impact and social impact funds and environmental sort of funds. And we really changed the narrative depending on what type of investor we're talking to. So, I mean, we like avoided the word volunteer and community in all our conversations with traditional Silicon Valley VCs, because they don't care about that. So but whereas we lead with the impact narrative for impact investors, because otherwise they get I think most investors struggle with when something's not quite clear, there's not clarity around what the proposition is. So you just don't want them to be confused. If they're confused, I think, they just move on to the next thing that's easier to understand.
Right.
What do you think as early stage co-founders, like neither of which were technical, how did you feel about working with like a third party agency? Because we have that conversation a lot with founders who, neither are technical, they're looking for outsourcing, and traditionally the response from investors has been, no, we have to see the technical and the business / ops side mix between two co-founders.
It's a good question. If you can have a technical co-founder, it's obviously then makes it easier for an investor to understand or to have to buy in, that you can sort of build it in-house in a lean way. But that's not always the case. For us, what we did is we just kept saying that the app was actually the least important part of the product. The product is bringing two people together in real life. So the product is your neighbor. right? And so we have experience acquiring and like, getting people, organizing volunteers, organizing communities in order to basically build out the network of users. And so we always sort of focused on network as opposed to the app itself, which is just more of a functional utility to facilitate that connection. So I hope that makes sense.
Sasha, may I please ask here, when you talk about building network at early onset and early stages, how strong was this networking for you? If monetization or a planned monetization wasn't what you were showing the investors. So did you have a very strongly built network right at the start, or how did you actually scale up your numbers to eventually be able to show it?
So we scaled using our community. Our community recruited our community. And we did that through, right now today, we've got, I think, 60,000 community heroes. Community heroes are people who self-elect into spreading the word about Olio in their neighborhood. And they request a physical marketing pack, which has got flyers and posters and, all the sort of local things that you need. And then they go out in their neighborhood and they tell their neighbors about Olio by handing out flyers and putting out posters. And that's how we started in the beginning when we were just in North London, as I went around handing out flyers, standing in front of tube stops. And then I went from, Crouch End to Finsbury Park. And as we went, we encountered people who said, what you're doing is amazing. How can I help? And then we realized that we could harness the power of volunteers who really cared about our mission. And all we needed to do then is to build a structure that was scalable and sort of automated, which we've done through simple email pathways and MailChimp. And sending people out in the streets to hand out flyers. So this is a really, really almost zero cost acquisition strategy. And if you're doing something that your customers really care about, there are a lot of people out there who will want to spend their own time supporting you and helping you to grow, which is another advantage of being a mission-based company.
I've got two questions, both are slightly different. First one is kind of based off what you were just talking about, but if you didn't have to kind of prove what your revenue or path to revenue was going to be at that early stage when you were talking to investors back in 2015, 2016, was there anything else that you were measuring where you were proving that you were kind of at that early stage towards product market fit that you would recommend other people measure and focus on?
Yeah, so we built a website and well, actually one of the first things we did was a market research survey, we did in SurveyMonkey, I think. We posted in local Facebook groups and we had just under 500 people fill it out. And that was really helpful to, give us some key information. So 35% of everyone who completed the survey said they felt physically pained when they throw away food that's edible or was recently edible. And then obviously we had lots of information in about intent to use the product and likelihood to volunteer and all of that kind of stuff. But of course there's a difference between what people say they'll do and what they actually do. So then we recruited 12 people from the survey who didn't know each other, but lived in the same sort of area. And we put them in a WhatsApp group for 2 weeks. And the rules were just share any food you don't want, take a picture, post it, and then request it. And we watched it, we monitored it, we didn't intervene. And we had 26 listings, shares over 2 weeks. And so that was really powerful validation that people will follow through. And then actually when we finished that, we debriefed with all the participants, people said that they'd connected with someone that they'd known on Twitter or Facebook for 10 years, but they'd never met in real life. And anyway, but they also told us that the app just basically didn't need to be much better than a WhatsApp group, which meant we went back to our wireframes for our MVP and stripped out all of these things like ratings and a map and stuff that we had thought would be mission critical. So that was a helpful exercise. And then once we actually built the app, we're looking at conversion all along the funnel. I think having a really good understanding of what your user pathway is for your customer and what the conversion, what your funnel looks like, because it'll be very different depending on what your business is. And then you need to get people through the funnel and you need to track at those particular places, whether it's converting to a certain behavior, doing it again, what, taking some type of action. And then there are generally like industry benchmarks out there for things that you would expect. So, we 10% of the people who come on Olio today, add a listing, which, is right sort of in the benchmark. Of course, we want it to be higher. So investors have a sense of what metrics, but yeah, so all along the funnel. And then anything you can do to like get people to express an interest, like to take a positive action, whether it's joining a mailing list, whether it's signing up to take some flyers, whatever, all of that kind of stuff is very helpful.
And that's really good when you're at the early stage, because there's not the huge cost involved in getting a survey monkey and posting it in some community groups and just getting that initial validation before you spend money on the technical.
I belong right now to nearly 1,000 Facebook groups, because back in the day, all I did was post like join Olio, download Olio, in Facebook groups like all over the country, all over the world, to get that early traction. And then you can take that traction and you can say 100 people joined yesterday, and then that's the number that you use, even if you had to spend all your time, moving mountains to get that to happen.
Totally. My second question, slightly different. Did you pivot at any point? Obviously, the mission at the beginning is the same as it is now, but from a business model or user perspective, what was the story there?
Well, yes, loads. And we're in the middle of doing it again. So we started with the ability for people to sell items as long as it was 50% off. And we had that for about a year. And then we raised, the day after we raised our first amount, we took it off. That was actually our business model. Then we moved to free only, but we're actually now about to bring that back confidentially in a couple months. We had the ability to raise funds for charity through donating your items to the community. That worked for a while. The problem is, it's fine if something works okay, but there's a burden of upkeep, both from a sort of hygiene perspective, a technical perspective, but also customer confusion perspective, answering customer support. What do you stand for? So we recently, a couple months ago, removed a section in the app called Made, which is where you could sell homemade food or handmade crafts. And we had 38,000 makers on there selling their stuff, but it was fundamentally a different behavior. We were trying to drive demand into that section in the app, whereas in the free section of the app, we have the opposite problem. Demand is off the charts, but we don't have enough supply. And it was too much of a drag organizationally to inhabit those two mindsets. So we sadly had to cut it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we bring it back at some point.
How do you, since you experiment a lot, when you're setting up a new, I guess a new experiment, so to speak, do you set up failure metrics before, or metrics that if it's this after this amount of time, you're going to cut it? Or how do you define that?
We did it in the past. I think we were too subscale, and we were very intuitive with regard to how we did product. But now that we actually have a chief product officer and proper product function, they have put that in place, which is really, it's quite difficult actually as a founder, when you sort of in your gut, you're like, no, I don't care what the research says. I don't care what the customer insights say. I want to do this anyway. And we can't really operate like that anymore. I think when you're subscale, part of it is that you really do need to follow your gut, but just find really low friction ways to test things that doesn't involve a lot of build. So we did a lot of standing on street corners and showing people two different drawings or two different flyers or two different logos, that kind of stuff.
You mentioned at the beginning that the investors are kind of put off when you can't be succinct about exactly what your problem is and how your solution relates to the problem. And a lot of the work that we do in these programs is getting to that point where the problem is really easy to define. Can you just tell us what would be your problem statement and what is your solution?
It's a good question. I think our problem statement is that we are consuming as if we have 3 Earths, and we don't, and it's unsustainable. And the amount of waste that is happening in that consumption process can be solved with our fast and easy, simple, fun to use sharing tool. Something like that. But yeah.
How do you and your co-founder divide up tasks and roles between each other, especially in the early days?
In the very early days, before we even, but we had done another business together briefly, like 2 years before, and then we went separate ways. I did another business, she did something else, and we came back together. So we knew we liked to work together, but we wanted to be quite formal about how we approached it. So we took a weekend together and read The Founder's Dilemma, and we sort of worked through all of the different elements that are in that book and had like an honest discussion around sort of what motivates us, et cetera. That was quite helpful to lay the groundwork, but that forced a conversation around roles. There's sort of probably about a third of me and a third of Tessa that are identical, which is very handy because we can sub for each other. But the rest of it, we have very clear like strengths or areas of that we're passionate about. And we sort of sat down and worked through that at the beginning. It wasn't that difficult of a conversation because it's actually it's quite clear based on our backgrounds and experiences, what we enjoyed doing or where we could add the most value.
Cool. So we'll go to questions in probably about another 3 to 4 minutes. So if you do have any, then do raise your hand or post it in the group. I know someone's already asked whether it's common or not to go straight for VC funding versus angel funding. Our experience is that that's not that common, but and was that the conscious choice because you put in some of your own money and you just wanted to skip lots of rounds, or was there something else?
We were also talking to angels. We just sort of got preempted by Excel. I mean, we went in to ask for advice, and we thought we were going to raise 250, like a pre-seed round. And we came out with them saying, you should raise 3 times that much. We'll take the whole round. Can we do it immediately? So I know it's not a traditional story. I'll tell you what cinched that in the moment in the sort of Excel meeting room was that one of the partners opened the app and there was like 1 lemon on it in a listing, like, and not like a great lemon. And someone had written a really long description, like, it's not the best lemon, but there's probably still some juice in it. And maybe you could dry the peels and then, whatever. And like, he was like, if the fact that someone has gone to this much effort, and also we could see that we followed up, it got requested, someone picked it up. So I'm pretty sure that behind the scenes, that might've been some of the volunteers that we were like doing the matchmaking to go and collect things, but it didn't matter. That was that sort of like magic moment where we brought the value proposition to life. And then things just got fast tracked. So I know it's not very helpful information, but I mean, with regard to fundraising, so Tessa fundraises all year long, not just when we're raising. We are having conversations in between rounds, several a week, in building those relationships, because even if it's not the right stage, not the right partner, there's a lot of movement within people go from one fund to another fund, and then one stage to another stage, and they sort of like, they all talk to each other. So you need to sort of be one of the companies, or you want to try and aspire to be one of the companies that's like top of the tongue. And everyone's like, oh, Olio, I know who they are, even if they wouldn't invest in you because they only invest in, companies who are fintech or this or that. So and we did actually try and raise through in the end, we did get quite a few angels. We went through like an angel aggregator who helped us like find high net worth individuals, which was quite helpful. But that was actually all for the second round after the first one. And yes, it is more typical to get the angel investment up front. And SEIS and EIS, I'm sure you guys are all aware of that, but are like fantastic tax incentives, and you should and you, by the way, you don't need to be have assured, whatever it is, HMRC assurance that you're going to be eligible for it. 95%, any angel investor who's not brand new, like, knows sort of what the criteria and what the probability of you getting it is. So, and it's quite expensive and a distraction. So feel free to say, we know that we're SEIS, but we're not going to get assured advice. Not assured advice. What's it called? Assurance.
ASA, advanced.
Yeah.
Assurance. What advice do you have for startups who have have like shift consumer behavior to get people to use the app? Like I'm guessing most of your early users and users now aren't previously, it's not like they're moving from a different food sharing app to yours. It's probably their first time doing that. It's hard. It's really hard. And we have not cracked it. Like we haven't cracked it, if I'm honest. We're still trying to figure that out and how we do it. But my advice would be to review the Crossing the Chasm model. And when you're thinking about your early adopters and trying to get to mainstream adoption, and it's for us, it's been really, really helpful. So we want everyone everywhere to use Olio. So that's a really big target audience, but actually it's a lot easier for us if we just focus on like moms, sort of around 25 to 44 moms, and like they all talk to each other. So rather than trying to talk to students and to talk to environmental activists and to talk to sharing economy hipsters and like talk to everyone, like we have focused. And I think then you get that self-referent within that cohort, that audience, then they talk to each other, and that can really help, because when you're trying to change consumer behavior, then the thing that encourages people to do something is when someone else has done it. So if you so I guess my advice would be, now that I'm thinking out loud, is like reduce your target audience to the point where you can get just the early adopters within that segment to do it, and then find a way to encourage, motivate, bribe them to tell all their friends about it. Okay,
should we go to a few questions? Unless you've got any more, Emma.
I was just going to say, do you have any more questions, or should we move to Q&A? So
all good. Yvonne, I've got you as the first person with your hand up. Do you want to take yourself off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thanks so much for this session. And for telling the story about Olio. I'm actually a subscriber of Olio, which I just happened on one day when I was looking online, and I just thought, wow, this is fantastic, and then subscribed. So it's fantastic being able to speak to the person who came up with the idea. So my question is, how do you find yourself able to speak to people about your ideas in a way that gets them on board with what you're doing? Because it's not so much, I suppose, when speaking to investors or customers or all that, it's always you, isn't it? And they're buying into you at the end of the day. Whatever people say, even networking, it's always about buying into you and who you are. What is it that you personally do to get people to buy into you?
I start by telling people about my childhood and like the core motivators for why I'm really, really, really care about devoting my life to solving this problem. And Tessa and I both always start with our backgrounds. So that, I think, storytelling, just generally, is figure out what those stories are, whether it's about you or what that inspired you personally to want to solve this problem. There's always a famous like origin story behind like almost every successful product or service. So know what that is, know how to say it, and keep testing it until you can do it in a way where it really hooks their attention. And then it depends on the audience, but I do think, can I please share your why? Sorry, I can't read the comments and talk at the same time. And then I would also say that the power of stories in general for us has been one of the key ways that we get people to come and to try Olio. And we use user testimonials, and we have a place in the forum where people can thank each other and talk to each other. And we try and like really surface across all of our channels, in email, newsletters, social, like real stories from real people, because that's, I think, what generally is the most attractive way to get people to want to support your cause, buy your product, etc. I don't know if that was a
that question in the chat was, what is your why, or what's your origin story, I guess.
I just can't turn off chat previews because it's a bit distracting. Oh, what's my origin story? Oh, well, so I grew up, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I grew up in Iowa in rural America, and my parents were real hardcore hippies, which you might have guessed from my last name. I had a very unconventional childhood, but I also grew up without a lot of money. And it was my job as my mom's sidekick to help her make ends meet. And so we used to go all around town collecting things that other people threw away. So we would go to houses that were being torn down and take, banisters, pieces of wood, taps, toilets, whatever, and bring them home. And then I used to also spend a lot of time in the dumpster behind the plant nursery, picking up broken plants, which we would replant and then we would resell, like nurse them back to health. And so I really learned, and it's very much ingrained in me, like I hate seeing things of value go to waste. Like it makes me feel ill. But at the same time, my motivator, like I definitely did not want to grow up to be like my mom. Like, so I really pursued the sort of very opposite path for a very long time. Studied economics. I went to investment banking, management consulting. I was at American Express for 6 years before Olio. And I had this very sort of risk adverse, financially secure career. Anyway, so I could go through, it's a long story how I found my way back to entrepreneurship, how I realized like that is where I belong and how I love it. But my motivation is to help create a world where we don't let perfectly good stuff go to waste. And not just because of the environmental impact, because of all of the people who are struggling to make ends meet and, could benefit from whatever it is that someone else no longer needs.
Especially right now in this market and time, it's extra relevant.
Yes.
Okay, we have a question from Haley.
90% of everything that's produced is used for less than a year.
90, wow.
And 60% of greenhouse gas emissions are directly related to the choices we make about consumption within our own homes. And then, so we are really powerful. Like each of us individually can feel insignificant, but collectively, decisions we make, it took billions of small, mindless decisions to get ourselves into this mess. And like, just flip it and let's make billions of mindful decisions and we will crawl our way out of it. And I really believe that. And so the opportunity to have impact at scale that can sort of change the course of history that makes me sound really egotistical. But like, I want to have that. And I find that incredibly motivating. And usually if you know what motivates you, and like, I can feel myself getting excited right now, when you talk to other people about it authentically, you'll get them motivated as well.
Yeah, it shines through. So question from Haley, she has asked, would love to hear about how you rolled out a hyper-local launch strategy and tackled the cold start problem with the two-sided marketplace.
Very, very manually in a way that does not scale, neighborhood by neighborhood. We called it a village rollout plan. And first we did it by village in London, like Stoke Newington. I can't remember all of them. Muswell Hill, whatever, right? Highgate, one village at a time. And then we did it borough by borough. And each time we've got more traction, you could have access to greater resources from the council, more volunteers, et cetera. So, and then we did it city by city. There is a lot of information on our website about how we cracked that sort of supply and demand chicken and egg problem. And also there is a podcast that I did called Be More Pirate, which goes into a lot of the early guerrilla sort of tactics that we did, if you're interested. I can't go through them all right here. I mean, there's so many things that we did over the years.
Yeah. We can find some links on the website and send it to everyone in the chat afterwards. And we send out a newsletter afterwards, so we can post anything that's useful there rather than spending all the time talking about it now. We've got a question. Is it Anik?
Yep, Anika.
Hi.
Hey, Sasha, how are you doing?
If I knew you were on the call, I might have filtered some of my earlier comments about
No,
investors.
that's all good. So just some background, everyone. I used to work as an investor for a venture capital fund. About 3 years ago, I met Sasha and I was just blown away by her and her co-founder and convinced my fund to invest back then in you. And I'm so happy we did because, you're still one of my biggest examples and inspirations for quitting my job and actually becoming a founder myself now.
Yay.
So it's so nice to hear your stories. And it's just, I really recognize everything that you say. My question, because you also said in the beginning, you're also angel investing a bit in the past. You've stopped that because the market's gone to shit. I think a lot of the founders here are curious, okay, how do we get to the next stage, given the current market circumstances? What are your what's your advice to them? I know that you guys were, I mean, the right people in the right place with the right idea. Timing is maybe not great now, but what would you advise to us?
My advice would be, and I've just recently given this to a few founders that I mentor, is do not get hung up on like valuation and terms, right? Like if there's capital out there and like you can get a sliver of it, like do it within reason, obviously. And actually, it might be the case that with the dollar so strong that some of the European investments start to look pretty affordable. Now, I don't have a network of angel investors in the US, but obviously there are lots of syndicates and that kind of thing. I would make sure you've really stress tested your deck with different, whether they're with investors, even if they say no, get feedback on your deck. Because as an angel, what happened, I get a deal drop every week on Thursdays. And you just flick through the PDF, right? And it takes like between 10 and 20 seconds on each page. And so there's a lot of things you need to convey in a short period of time, and just make sure that that experience has been tested with as many, you've gotten the feedback, you've incorporated the feedback. What else would I do? I mean, talk to other founders are really generous. So I would say, you know, really talk to as many founders as you can. And they will put you in touch, even if they don't, even if that's not, they ask when you go in, if they're really excited by what you're doing, they will put you in touch with founders who are at the stage or two ahead of you with investors that they know. They'll just, because it happens all the time, the sort of behind the scenes, sort of like, oh, I met this founder for coffee. Here's her deck. It's sort of in your area. What do you think? And then things just get forwarded along like little spider, whatever. You never know where it's going to go. So don't just try and meet with investors, like also meet with founders. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Thanks. Awesome. Good seeing you again.
Nice to see
Great seeing you.
Can't wait to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great. Okay, next question. Okay, quick one from Danny, but judging off your earlier response, I'm going to guess it's a no. Did you ever face motivation paralysis? And if so, how did you overcome it?
I think I'm a slightly different one. I did face motivation paralysis, but it wasn't because of Olio. It was because my personal life like imploded for about 5 years while I went through a really messy divorce, and then spent time in the family court system, which I hope none of you guys have to ever go through. And it was, you know, like I was heartbroken, right? And like, so my big problem was how to show up to work every day, and not feel like I wasn't giving enough, or that I wasn't present enough, or that I was being a bad leader, or that I was like letting people down. And that meant that I was sort of like overcompensating, and I was just, I was miserable. Yeah. So it wasn't working. It wasn't working. So what did I do? Well, I was really honest with my co-founder, who obviously is also one of my best friends. And, she really helped me to carve out time for like self-care when I needed it. I was also really honest with my team, about what was going on, so they didn't wonder why it was like an absolute mess. And I'm honest with people, like I was also honest with other people, like I'm being honest with you. I was honest with our investors, actually our main partner, whatever, not giving anything away, but everyone has like a real life, not just their work life. And so I think that level of honesty helps to like make sure that you can all cheer each other on when things aren't going well, whether it's at work or it's in your personal life. But the other answer to that is when I do start to feel a bit blue, like numbers are going the wrong way, I open up the app, and there's a section there that's called the forum, and there's 8 different categories. One category is called I Heart Olio, and I just leave that filter on, and I scroll, because it's just people saying how much they love Olio. And it only takes 10 or 15 minutes before you're like, all right, and you're cheered up again. So find a way to get easy access to those customers that adore your product. And so you can tap into that to get the motivation.
Love that.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Silva. Do you want to take yourself off mute?
Hi, sorry, I wasn't ready. I was listening to your answer. Hi, lovely to meet you. I have a question to rewind you back to, at the beginning. And I have, just to give you a background, I have a fashion retail brand that I started last year. So I make products. So it's physical products. I'm not selling services, or I don't have an app or anything like that. I've got a website set up, and it's a sustainable and fully circular fashion brand. But my question is that I've started, some people would say too late raising investment, because I already have a product. So I've got a very small customer base, and I ran out of my own money. So I use my savings to do everything from the beginning. And so this summer I started looking for investment, started researching investment. So I'm at the very, very initial stage, and I've done my deck, and then I'm, I've joined this organization, and I'm in this group, and I'm getting inundated with lots of different small companies, or maybe even big companies, offering services to help me to get a kind of bridge their first stage, get me ready for investment. And obviously everyone wants payment. So the question that I have is like, have you used any external services like legal services to get your pitch ready, to get your financials ready, to get your technical stance ready? Have you used any of those for your first round of investment?
No, no, we didn't. And that makes me, yeah, I don't know enough about those services and the efficacy of those services to recommend or not recommend. But if cash is scarce, I would really try and do whatever you can without them. I mean, you've got a network here of hundreds of women who've all got different experiences and skills. Like, team up, even if you don't have a co-founder, make like a faux founder, like relationship with others, so you can help, someone, if you need support with the business, the forecasting or the financials, someone can help you, and maybe you can help someone with the design element. If that's what I would say. And if you do go with any of those services, get a referral, ask for a referral from a satisfied investor, a satisfied founder of a company that you respect, who tells you, yes, I wouldn't have got this kind of funding without this type of service. That would be my thing. Just one sec, there's someone at the doorbell.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, Silva, there are a lot of people who try and make money out of early stage founders.
Yes.
And so anyone, I would just use the group as well for a sense check. So if there is one particular organization, just post the link to them in the group, and people will tell you whether they've heard of them, whether they've used them, if they're completely unknown. And even MA and myself, we can just give you an idea, but you shouldn't have to pay for any of this stuff, because there's so many people that will offer support to founders for free but there's also so many people that will try and capitalize on a founder as well. So it's gotta.
Yes, I did find that. And also, I think it was yesterday, something was posted on a WhatsApp group. I think it's called Capital One or something like that. And you pay a fee to get your startup rated, whether it's investor ready or not. And then if you are investment ready, they forward your pitch to their network of investors. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like a small nominal fee, but if you do a few of those, then it all adds up to quite substantial cost for a small startup.
Yeah, I would avoid anything that you have to pay for in order to get in front of investors. Okay, question from Mitali. How do you avoid liability for consumers, especially when you're early stage too, and maybe didn't have a lot of money for legal advice?
I found a very, very, very affordable lawyer who just loved what we were doing and said, how much do you have? Like, what's your budget? And then that's what he charged us for a long time. So again, even when you're shopping for suppliers, if you find someone who loves what you're doing or really buys into it, then you can get preferential rates. the liability is actually really straightforward. Like Olio is an advertising platform, and the terms and conditions and put the liability on the people who use it. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It wasn't a hurdle. What was a much bigger hurdle, which took years, excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, was getting building a robust food safety management system that oversees and basically has all the guardrails in place for the redistribution of short shelf life food real time that's donated by businesses from individuals' homes. As you can imagine, I mean, anyway, I won't go into the stories, but that is actually also, I think, part of our competitive moat. And it'd be quite difficult for someone else to come in and sort of recreate that particular element of what we do. So, yeah.
Cool. We've got another few questions with people with a hand raised. So, Pulami?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Sasha. I'm super impressed. And I heard about Olio first time from Shirisha, who was telling me that you would work on the story. And when Olio had come, that story was super. So I have a question for you, which is I went to your site and I saw that you're not, you also mentioned about it, you haven't broken even yet, you're not profitable. And so when I am talking to investors, and this is a question which I have, like when you're pitching for seed or Series A, they must be asking you a lot about the business model. So like, were you, and I'm also testing out a lot of business models. I have some in the place, but then were you sort of selling the story when you're like at the stage you were in then? Because I think I'm at a similar stage where you were, we have traction, we have numbers, we haven't started monetizing yet. So I just want to understand, like, you know, when you're pitching to investors, be it angel, you didn't, but then you went to VCs. I'm here pitching to angels as well as VCs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make a model, right? Yeah. Anyone, I have a lot of experience with that given my background. And so we always made a model, and then we made a tab that had assumptions. And then what we would do is we put the assumptions as a variable, which could flag it as yellow. And then we would put in like a range, a suggested range, and then we would for everything, and then we would like conversion, 5 to 10%, and then we'd say, and then we would but we would provide like a source for the assumption, like a benchmark or a reason why that's the assumption, the suggested value is the way it is. And then we would have like the outputs area where it would spit out the key metrics, like number of signups, number of listings, revenue, et cetera. And then we could give this to the investors and let them play around with it. But the default model, we would screenshot and then we put it in the deck, in the appendix. And that's pretty much been our approach every round of financing. So a lot of times at the beginning, we didn't have any revenue, but we just tried to put it in the model when we thought it was going to come in. And so it is completely fictionalized. But I think at this stage, the investor just wants to know that you've got the analytical rigor, that you're ambitious. One of the big things I see coming through angel decks is like really unambitious targets. Like you don't want to be unreasonable, but like it's not that exciting if you're gonna, sort of make 10 million, after 10 years or something like that. So I think really is about signaling that you've got the analytic, you know how to build a model, you know how to think about just sort of basic like path to profitability, but also that you're ambitious. You understand the key drivers that your fictionalized business will eventually be driven by. And it's more about, I think, just wanting to see that you have that capability rather than exactly what it will be. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much. But were they insisting on monetization by any chance? Like, because right now we are getting the market is so bad. Like, why don't you launch and start monetizing immediately? Like, that's what we're sort of getting.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
I'm asking, were they insisting on monetization back then? Like, were they insisting on fast monetization as soon as, like, they were pushing you to launch fast and then monetize as well?
Our investors never pushed us sorry, you've got a lot of background noise, Pulami, so it's quite hard to understand you. Our investors did not push us to monetize. I don't know whether that's because it was a different environment or because by definition, monetizing a network that's subscale is counterproductive, because it means you're going to have less transactional activity, and transactional activity is where the value is at scale for a marketplace, which in a network effects business. It's very different if you're trying to, let's say, sell clothing. Like, you, of course, an investor is not going to want to see you just give it away for free. So I think it's very specific to the business.
Okay,
And
we're
one
going
thing
to.
our investors always said to us, our Excel partner, she always said, once you start monetizing, you can't go back. So her insight there was that if you are lucky enough to be in a situation where you can sort of talk about the theoretical upside when you start monetizing, it's a lot easier to sell a theoretical upside than to explain why you're really crappy results. So balance.
Okay, we've probably got time for 2 more questions.
I have a hard stop at 3. I have to go get my kid from school.
Of course. Okay, we're going to do Keith first, and then whoever is under iPhone 2, can you turn on the camera and we'll go to you right afterwards. But Keith, can you keep your question to like 1 or 2 sentences?
Great. Sasha, I'm a big fan of Olio. I think I was one of the early users when you guys had a basic website. Like, yeah, I was telling my husband about it. He didn't get it at all. But you know what? I'm so glad that you guys have done really well. Anyway, quick one. My startup is Yap Yap. Like Olio. Kind of. I mean, instead of connecting people with food, I connect dog parents, dog owners, basically. Yeah, so for play dates, for meetups, and for advice. So kind of, I would say the model be similar in the sense that I am trying to convince. I mean, obviously, I think network effect is definitely what I need to achieve. But my question has always been, you did mention that when you spoke to an investor, you refrained from using the word community. How would you have positioned Olio initially? And also, how did you convince that Olio is a network effect type of business without before you sort of reach the critical mass on network effect?
Well, I'm glad you're a fan. I'm not sure I know how to answer your question succinctly, if I'm honest. Community is like, the word community has been on quite a journey over the last 7 years. There's a lot of community washing going on right now, and people calling like their Instagram feed their community, and that's not what community is. So it was more in the beginning that when we were talking to a very commercial investor, when we talked about the size of the problem, the strength of our solution, and our operational excellence to unlock that, like that, we focused on those types of things. Whereas when we were talking to other businesses that did care about building a community or having environmental impact, then we would talk more about the link between food waste and the environment and the scale of food poverty and things like that. So we definitely tailored our message depending on what type of investor. I think you just need to understand, what is your investor looking for? What's their investment thesis, right? And so how do you play back to them to make it easy for them to reduce their cognitive processing? You know, when they hear your pitch, if they're hearing things that they're comfortable with and fit with their investment thesis, then there's less like cognitive overload. With regard to your particular app, or product or whatever, trying to connect dog owners, there's obviously a lot of dog owners, so you know, that's not the problem. I guess the problem is, like, it is about how are you probably going to monetize, and how do you turn this from something that's like nice to have to something that's like actually could be a strong profitable business. I'm not sure, but you need some answer, whatever it is, it's almost hypothetical. It's almost arbitrary sometimes what your monetization model is, as long as you can explain it and it's a model that's worked with other businesses in the past. I feel like I'm not providing helpful advice.
No, you are totally. I mean, yeah.
I'm not trying to say fake it till you make it to all you ladies at the beginning of your founder journey, but like, you can't overthink things, and actually, it's not just everything, your entire business model, everything you're doing is just a work in progress. It's just a hypothesis. And as you just learn fast, talk to as many people, and just iterate, not just your product, but your messaging, how you speak to customers, how you speak to investors. And that's the fastest, that feedback loop, that's the fast that you will get just by trying to keep the pace up. So Tess and I really like had our foot on the accelerator, like the whole time, from when we came up with the app to when we launched in the App Store was 5 months, right? So I do think that it's actually better to proceed at pace imperfectly right, where you're sort of blagging it, making it up, than to try and spend too long overthinking like what the right particular answer is. Because the fastest way to learn whether it's right or wrong is to like go out and test it. And that's a mindset that we really inhibit.
I think proceed at place is the perfect way to wrap up this session, and a great message for all of us. Okay, we'll let you get out of here really quickly. I've heard you say before the best way to thank you for a talk is to sign up for Olio and share some food.
Yes.
So everyone,
Or non-food. Have a toiletry clear out. Half bottles of shampoo, old perfume from your ex, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, get rid of the items from your ex on Olio.
Exactly. Oh my God, that's a great Valentine's campaign. I'm gonna. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Ciao.
Okay.